The crystalline spires of the Grand Council Hall refracted the morning light across the polished floor, casting rainbow patterns that danced around Ambassador Sira's feet as she made her way to her seat. The Council of Nine Worlds was convening for its monthly session, and the tension in the air was palpable. Representatives from each world sat in tiered rows, their faces solemn as they prepared to address the growing list of interstellar crises that threatened the fragile peace they had worked so hard to maintain. Sira, the envoy from the Hestia Accord, smoothed down her ceremonial blue robes and took her place at the crescent-shaped table. At 43, she had become one of the most respected voices in the hall, known for her measured approach to conflict resolution and her background in medical diplomacy. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing eyes that had witnessed both the best and worst of galactic politics over her 15-year tenure. "The Council of Nine Worlds is now in session," announced High Chancellor Varix, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "Stellar Year 4822, Day 47. We have several matters to address today, but I believe Ambassador Thule of the Brithos Confederation has requested priority speaking rights." Thule rose, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the table. "Esteemed colleagues, I bring troubling news. The agricultural world of Telora has sent an emergency transmission. A plague of unknown origin has broken out in their southern hemisphere and is spreading rapidly. Their medical infrastructure is overwhelmed, and they are requesting immediate assistance." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Telora, while not a member of the Council, was a significant supplier of rare botanical compounds, essential for various medical treatments across the galaxy. Any disruption to their production could have far-reaching consequences. "What exactly are they asking for?" asked Ambassador Dren of the Kadari Syndicate, her eyes narrowing. The Syndicate controlled a significant portion of pharmaceutical distribution in the sector, and Sira had always found Dren's motivations questionable at best. "Medical personnel, equipment, and expertise," Thule replied. "Their transmission indicates that the pathogen appears to be a mutated strain of the cerulean fever that ravaged the Outer Rim a decade ago." Sira leaned forward. The cerulean fever had been one of the most devastating outbreaks in recent galactic history, with a mortality rate approaching 70%. If Telora was facing a mutated strain, the situation was dire indeed. "I propose we dispatch immediate relief," Sira said, her voice calm but firm. "2 medical ships with volunteer staff should be sufficient for initial assessment and containment protocols." Chancellor Varix nodded thoughtfully. "A measured response. Does anyone object?" Ambassador Dren's lips curved into a thin smile. "The Kadari Syndicate would be happy to provide pharmaceutical support, but we must consider the costs. Perhaps a single ship would be more economically prudent." Sira resisted the urge to scoff. The Syndicate's concern was never for economics, but for their own profit margins. "With respect, Ambassador, containing an outbreak requires comprehensive resources. 2 ships represent the minimum effective response." After 30 minutes of debate, painfully slow by emergency standards, the Council agreed to dispatch 2 unarmed medical vessels to Telora. Sira felt a knot of unease in her stomach as the session adjourned. 2 ships seemed woefully inadequate, but it was better than nothing. As she gathered her notes, Ambassador Dren approached her, perfume wafting around her like a toxic cloud. "Such passion for the Talorans. Ambassador Sira, one might think you have personal ties to their world." "I have ties to life itself, Ambassador," Sira replied evenly. "As should we all." Dren's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed, though sometimes life requires commercial solutions." As Dren glided away, Sira couldn't shake the feeling that the Kadari Syndicate saw the Taloran crisis not as a humanitarian emergency, but as an opportunity. 3 weeks later, Sira stood before the Council again, this time with far grimmer news. The holographic display in the center of the hall showed statistics that turned her stomach. The plague had spread to 6 major Tellurian cities, with confirmed cases numbering in the thousands and rising exponentially. "The containment measures have failed," she reported. "The medical teams we sent report that the pathogen has mutated again, rendering initial treatment protocols ineffective. Tellurian hospitals are at capacity, and quarantine zones are breaking down due to lack of resources." Chancellor Varix frowned deeply. "What are they requesting now?" "Everything we can offer," Sirah said bluntly. "Medical personnel, field hospitals, vaccine research teams, and supply transports. Their government is considering a planet-wide lockdown, but they lack the infrastructure to enforce it without causing mass starvation." Ambassador Thule cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation of key personnel. Tellurian agricultural scientists could continue their work off-world while—" "And abandon millions to die?" Sirah interrupted, uncharacteristic heat in her voice. "Forgive me, Ambassador, but evacuation would only save a privileged few while condemning the rest." The debate that followed was heated. The syndicate representatives pushed for limited intervention focused on economically viable zones, essentially abandoning rural areas to focus on urban centers where pharmaceutical facilities were located. Others suggested sending food shipments and refugee transports, but stopping short of full medical intervention, citing risks to their own worlds. "We have the cerulean fever vaccine," Sirah argued. "It may not be fully effective against this strain, but our research vessels could adapt it on site. What we lack is not capability but will." Ambassador Dren leaned back in her chair. "The syndicate has already begun work on a plasma-based vaccine that shows promise against the mutated strain. However, development requires significant investment. We would need exclusive distribution rights to recoup." "People are dying while we debate profit margins," Sirah cut in, her patience finally snapping. "This is not about business rights. It's about basic compassion." Chancellor Varix raised a hand for silence. "We will put it to a vote. Those in favor of immediate expanded medical intervention?" Sirah counted the raised hands. 4, including her own. Not enough. "Those in favor of limited intervention with food shipments and refugee transports?" 5 hands, a majority. Sirah felt a cold weight settle in her chest as Varix announced the council's decision. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. As the session ended, she received an urgent message on her personal communicator. One of the medical ships sent to Tellura had suffered a catastrophic engine failure while attempting to reach an isolated region. All hands lost. Suspicion immediately flared in her mind. Engine failures of that magnitude were exceedingly rare with modern technology. She needed to investigate. But first, she needed to speak with someone who understood the ground situation better than anyone. Dr. Mallon's holographic image flickered as the transmission struggled to maintain clarity across interstellar distances. The Tellurian physician looked exhausted, dark circles visible even through the imperfect projection. "Ambassador, thank you for speaking with me directly," he said, his voice cracking with fatigue. "The situation is deteriorating faster than I can describe. We've lost 3 major hospitals to infrastructure failure. The power grid simply couldn't handle the demand. We're setting up field treatment centers, but supplies are running critically low." Sirah nodded grimly. "The Council has approved food shipments and refugee transports, but I fear it won't be sufficient." Dr. Mallon laughed bitterly. "Refugee transports? Where would they go? No world wants to accept potentially infected Tellurians. And food is helpful, but without medical intervention, we're just feeding people who will die anyway." "I'm trying to change their minds," Sirah assured him. "But there's something else. One of our medical ships was lost. Do you know anything about that?" The doctor's expression darkened. "There are rumors, nothing concrete, but some say it wasn't an accident. The ship was heading for the easterly peninsula, which houses one of our largest medical research facilities, one that has been working on its own vaccine. Sira felt her suspicions hardening into certainty. Dr. Mallon, I need you to send me everything you have on that research facility, and keep it quiet. After ending the transmission, Sira sat in her quarters, reviewing the data Dr. Mallon had sent. The Easterly Peninsula facility had been close to a breakthrough on an herbal-based treatment derived from native Talaran plants that couldn't be synthesized off-world. If effective, it would render expensive pharmaceutical alternatives unnecessary. She was beginning to see the Qadari Syndicate's game. They didn't want the plague contained quickly. They wanted it contained on their terms, with their vaccines, at their prices. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Commander Jarek of the Peacekeeper Fleet standing there in full military dress, his expression grim. Ambassador Sira, I apologize for the late hour, but I've been directed to brief you on a developing situation. She invited him in, noting the rigid set of his shoulders and the careful blankness of his expression, the hallmarks of a military man about to deliver news he personally disagreed with. The Council has reconvened in emergency session, he said without preamble. Following the loss of the medical ship and reports of deteriorating conditions on Talora, they voted to deploy the Peacekeeper Fleet. Sira stared at him in disbelief. The full fleet? That's an armada of warships. Commander, Talora needs doctors, not soldiers. The official reasoning is that the situation requires a show of force to maintain order during aid distribution and enforce quarantine zones. His voice was carefully neutral, but Sira could detect the undercurrent of discomfort. This is madness, she said. The Talarans are a peaceful agrarian society. They've never even had a planetary military. Sending warships will create panic, not order. Commander Jarek shifted his weight slightly. I've been ordered to prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. 20 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. We launch in 12 hours. Sira paced the room, mind racing. How many medical personnel will be aboard? A token force, perhaps 50 across all vessels. And troops? 5,000 Marines, fully armed. She stopped pacing and faced him directly. Commander, you know this is wrong. We're sending guns instead of medicine. For a moment, his official mask slipped, revealing a troubled man beneath the uniform. My orders come from the Council, Ambassador. I don't have the luxury of moral judgments. We all have that luxury, Commander, and that responsibility. She held his gaze until he looked away. After he left, Sira made a decision. She couldn't stop the fleet deployment, but she could make sure she was on it. If warships were going to Talora, then at least one voice of reason would go with them. The Peacekeeper Fleet emerged from hyperspace in Talaran orbit 3 days later, a formation of gleaming metal behemoths against the green-blue backdrop of the planet. From the observation deck of the flagship Indomitable, Sira watched with a heavy heart as the dreadnoughts positioned themselves in triangular formation above the major population centers. Quite a sight, isn't it? Ambassador Dren's voice came from behind her. A proper response, finally. Sira turned slowly. I didn't realize the Syndicate had representatives aboard. Oh, I wouldn't miss this, Dren said with a smile. We're bringing order to chaos, after all. And the Syndicate has generously donated emergency medical supplies to be distributed under Peacekeeper protection. How altruistic, Sira replied, not bothering to hide her skepticism. And the fact that your vaccines will be the only option available to the Talarans is merely coincidental. Dren's smile hardened. Business and benevolence can coexist, Ambassador. While you've been wringing your hands, we've been developing solutions. Before Sira could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Commander Jarek's voice came over the intercom. All personnel to battle stations. We have incoming fire from the surface. Sira rushed to the bridge, where chaos reigned. Officers shouted orders as tactical displays showed multiple surface-to-space missile launches from around the capital city. "Status report," she demanded. Protocol forgotten in the urgency of the moment. Commander Jarek looked up from his command console, his face grim. "Talaran defense batteries are targeting our ships. Minor damage to the Vigilant. No casualties." "Defense batteries? Talora doesn't have military technology of that caliber." "Apparently they do now," he replied grimly. "Or someone has provided it to them." Sierra's mind raced. "Have you established communication with the surface?" "Attempting now, but they're not responding to standard channels." She made a quick decision. "Let me try. I have contacts on the surface who might listen." After a moment's hesitation, Jarek nodded and directed her to the communication station. With trembling fingers, she input the private channel Dr. Malin had given her. "This is Ambassador Sierra of the Hestia Accord. I need to speak with Dr. Malin immediately. This is an emergency." Seconds stretched into minutes before the screen flickered to life, revealing not Dr. Malin, but an elderly Talaran with deep-set eyes and ceremonial markings on his forehead. Elder Thanos, one of the planetary leaders. "Ambassador," he said, his voice cold. "You bring warships to our skies and expect us to respond with gratitude?" "Elder Thanos, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. The fleet was sent to provide security for aid distribution, not as an aggressive force." The Elder's expression remained stony. 20 warships for security? We requested doctors and received dreadnoughts. The Easterly Peninsula facility was destroyed by sabotage, and now an armada appears above our world. We are not fools. Ambassador. The Council made a mistake, Sierra admitted. But I am here to ensure that mistake doesn't become a tragedy. Please, cease fire, so we can begin medical evacuations and aid distribution. Why should we trust you? The last time we trusted outsiders. One of our most promising research facilities was reduced to ashes. Sierra took a deep breath. Because I will come to you, alone, unarmed. You can judge my intentions face to face. Commander Jarek, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. Ambassador, that's out of the question. The surface is a hot zone, both medically and militarily. She muted the transmission and turned to him. Do you have a better solution, Commander? Because at this rate, we're headed for an all-out conflict with people who need our help. His jaw tightened. At least take a security detail. That would defeat the purpose. Trust requires vulnerability. She unmuted the transmission. Elder Thanos, I will shuttle down to the coordinates of your choosing. All I ask is safe passage. The Elder studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. We will send coordinates. Come alone, as you have promised. As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted in protests. This is suicide. Ambassador, Jarek insisted, both from a security and medical standpoint. I've been vaccinated against the original cerulean fever strain, which offers some protection, she replied calmly. And I believe the Talarans want peace as much as we do. They're firing on us because they're terrified, not because they want war. And if you're wrong, she met his gaze steadily, then at least I'll have died trying to prevent a greater catastrophe. The shuttle broke through Talora's cloud cover, revealing a landscape both beautiful and haunting. Lush forests stretched to the horizon, interspersed with circular settlements that followed the planet's natural contours. But even from the air, Sierra could see the signs of a world in crisis, makeshift quarantine zones marked by red flags, fields left unharvested, and plumes of smoke rising from cremation pyres. She landed in a central plaza in the capital city of Vashon, where a small delegation waited. Dr. Malin was there, looking even more haggard in person than he had via hologram. Beside him stood Elder Thanos and several other community leaders, their faces masks of suspicion and exhaustion. As Sierra descended the shuttle ramp alone, she could feel thousands of eyes watching from windows and rooftops. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sounds of coughing from nearby medical tents. "I come in peace," she said, using the traditional Talaran greeting gesture, palms outward, head slightly bowed. Elder Thanos did not return the gesture. "You come from warships, Ambassador. Explain why we should not consider this an invasion." "Because I stand before you unarmed and alone," she replied. "Because I opposed sending the fleet and came anyway to ensure it becomes a force for healing, not harm. And because without cooperation between our peoples, thousands more will die unnecessarily." Dr. Malone stepped forward. "The ambassador has been an advocate for medical intervention from the beginning. I believe her intentions are genuine." Thanos remained unmoved. "Intentions matter less than actions. Your council sent an armada. And I am here to redirect that armada toward humanitarian ends," Sira insisted. "The ships carry supplies, equipment, and can transport medical personnel. Yes, there are Marines aboard, but they can establish secure corridors for aid distribution, build field hospitals, and maintain quarantine without firing a single shot." "And when the crisis passes, will your warships simply leave?" Sira met his gaze directly. "I will personally guarantee it, in writing, with my position and reputation as collateral. But right now, we are wasting precious time while people die." A commotion from the edge of the plaza interrupted them. A group of armed Talarans dragged forward a struggling figure, a human woman in civilian clothes. "We found her trying to access the central water purification system," one of the Talarans announced. "She had this." He held up a vial of cloudy liquid. The woman spat on the ground. "You're all dead anyway. The Syndicate always collects its debts." Sira felt a cold certainty settle over her. "She's with the Kadari Syndicate. They've been sabotaging relief efforts from the beginning." Elder Thanos' eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The Syndicate stands to profit enormously if they control the only effective treatment for this plague," Sira said. "They've been delaying real aid while developing their own vaccine, which they'll sell at premium prices." "That's absurd," the captured woman sneered. "The Syndicate is a legitimate business entity." "A legitimate entity that somehow knew exactly where our research facility was located?" Dr. Malone demanded. "That facility was developing a treatment that would have made your vaccines unnecessary." The pieces fell into place in Sira's mind. "They destroyed your research facility, sabotaged our medical ship, and have been pushing the Council toward military intervention rather than medical aid, all to protect their market position." The captured Syndicate agent's silence was confirmation enough. Elder Thanos turned to Sira, his expression grave but softened. "If what you say is true, Ambassador, then perhaps we have both been manipulated. But that still leaves us with warships in our skies and a plague in our cities." Sira nodded. "Then let's address both. Allow me to establish direct communication between you and Commander Jarek. Together, we can coordinate a true humanitarian response. Medicine, not militarism." For the first time, a flicker of hope appeared in the Elder's eyes. "And the Syndicate's interference will be fully investigated and brought before the Council," Sira promised. "Their actions constitute crimes against both our peoples." After a moment of consideration, Thanos nodded. "Very well, Ambassador. We will try trust once more." Aboard the Indomitable, Commander Jarek paced the bridge, checking his chronometer for the 5th time in as many minutes. Ambassador Sira had been on the surface for nearly 3 hours, and tension aboard the ship was reaching a breaking point. Several Talaran defense batteries remained active, locked onto various ships in the fleet. "Sir," a communications officer called. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's the Ambassador." Relief washed over Yarek's face. "Put her through!" The main view screen activated, showing Sira standing alongside Elder Thanos and Dr. Malone. "Commander," she began without preamble, "I've reached an agreement with the Talaran leadership. They will stand down their defenses if we reconfigure our deployment for humanitarian purposes only." Yarrick nodded. Understood. What are your orders, Ambassador? First, all weapon systems are to be taken offline, a visible gesture of our peaceful intent. Second, I need every available medical personnel prepared for immediate deployment to the surface. Third, convert cargo bays into treatment centers where we can bring the most critical patients. And the Marines? To be deployed only for constructing field hospitals, securing aid distribution routes, and assisting medical teams. No combat gear. Standard biohazard protection only. Elder Thanos spoke up. We will provide guides for your teams and share all our research on the pathogen. There's one more thing, Sira added, her expression hardening. Ambassador Dren and any other syndicate personnel aboard are to be detained pending investigation for sabotage and interference with humanitarian operations. Yarrick hesitated. That's a serious accusation, Ambassador. We have a syndicate operative in custody who has implicated her superiors. And I suspect if you search Dren's quarters, you'll find evidence of communication with the saboteurs. After a moment's consideration, Jarek nodded. I'll handle it personally. He turned to his executive officer. Begin reconfiguring the fleet for humanitarian operations. All weapons offline. Prepare medical teams for surface deployment. As officers rushed to comply, Jarek watched the transformation of his warships from instruments of destruction to vessels of healing. For the first time since receiving his orders, he felt a sense of rightness in his mission. The next 2 weeks saw a remarkable transformation on Telora. The Peacekeeper fleet, once viewed with terror, became a symbol of salvation as shuttles ferried medical personnel and supplies to the surface. Marines in biohazard gear worked alongside Talaran volunteers to construct field hospitals, distribute food and medicine, and maintain quarantine zones. In the capital city of Vashon, Sira worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Milan, coordinating efforts between human and Talaran medical teams. The combined knowledge of both worlds led to breakthroughs in treatment protocols, gradually reducing the mortality rate from 70% to less than 20%. Commander Jarek proved an unexpected ally. After detaining Ambassador Dren, who was found with encrypted communications linking her directly to the sabotage operations, he threw himself into the humanitarian mission with the same precision and dedication he would have given to a military campaign. The eastern quarantine zone is secure, he reported to Sira one evening as they reviewed operations in a converted temple that now served as their headquarters. And the vaccine distribution in the southern hemisphere has reached 80% of the population. Sira nodded, exhaustion evident in the shadows under her eyes. The new cases have dropped by 60% in the last 3 days. We're turning the corner. You were right, he said quietly. About all of it. The syndicate, the military response, everything. She offered a tired smile. Sometimes the hardest thing for military and political leaders to remember is that not every crisis requires force. Some require only compassion and expertise. A lesson I won't forget. He hesitated, then added, The Council has been asking for updates. They're concerned about the detainment of Ambassador Dren. I imagine they are, Sira replied dryly. Particularly those who received syndicate funding for their campaigns. Send them my full report, including the evidence we've gathered. Let them wrestle with their consciences for a change. The door opened, and Dr. Malin entered, a rare smile on his face. The latest test results are in. The combined vaccine is showing 95% efficacy against all strains of the pathogen. We've done it. For the first time in weeks, Sira felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. That's wonderful news, Doctor. How soon can we begin mass production? The facilities aboard the Indomitable have already begun synthesis. Within days, we'll have enough for the entire population. Yarrick cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. Elder Thanos has called for a gathering of all regional leaders tomorrow. He's requesting your presence, Ambassador. Sira's brow furrowed with concern. Did he say why? only that it concerns the future relationship between Talora and the Nine Worlds. The Grand Assembly Hall of Vashon had once been a place of celebration and ceremony. Now, it served as the meeting place for leaders from across the planet, many of whom had traveled for days through dangerous conditions to attend. Sira sat beside Commander Jarek in the observer section, watching as Elder Thanos took the central speaking position. "Fellow Talorans," the Elder began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "We have endured the greatest crisis in our recorded history. The plague has taken nearly 1 million of our people, destroyed communities, and tested our resilience in ways we could never have imagined." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. "Yet in our darkest hour, we have also witnessed something remarkable, the true meaning of interstellar cooperation." He gestured toward Sira and Jarek. "When warships appeared in our skies, we feared conquest. Instead, we received healing hands and open hearts." Sira felt a lump forming in her throat as Thanos continued. "The ambassador who walked unarmed into our midst, the commander who turned warriors into healers, the doctors who worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. These are the true faces of humanity, not the profiteers who sought to exploit our suffering." He raised his hands for silence as the hall erupted in applause. "Today, we must decide our path forward. Talora has always remained independent, wary of entanglements with larger powers. But perhaps isolation is no longer the wisest course." A murmur of surprise ran through the assembly. "I propose that Talora formally request observer status within the Council of Nine Worlds, with a path to full membership to be negotiated over the coming years. Not as supplicants, but as partners who have valuable knowledge and resources to share." The hall exploded into discussion, some voices raised in support, others in concern. Sira leaned toward Jarek. "This is unexpected. Talora has rejected council overtures for generations." "Crisis changes perspective," he replied. "For all of us." After nearly an hour of debate, the Taloran leaders called for a vote. The result was clear, an overwhelming majority in favor of seeking closer ties with the Nine Worlds. Elder Thanos approached Sira as the assembly began to disperse. "Ambassador, will you carry our petition to the council?" "With honor," she replied. "Though I must warn you, not all council members will welcome this development, particularly those with ties to the syndicate." The elder's weathered face creased in a smile. "We are well aware of the political realities, but we have also seen what is possible when people of good conscience stand together. That is a lesson worth the risk." 1 month later, Sira once again stood in the crystalline chamber of the Grand Council Hall. But everything had changed. The evidence against the Kadari Syndicate had led to the removal of 2 council members for corruption. Ambassador Dren awaited trial for crimes against sentient beings, and Sira herself had become something of a hero across the Nine Worlds as the full story of the Taloran crisis became known. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Sira of the Hestia Accord," Chancellor Varix announced, his tone considerably warmer than it had been before. Sira stepped forward, acutely aware of the eyes upon her. "Esteemed colleagues, I come before you with 2 matters of great importance. First, I present the formal petition of Talora for observer status within the Council, with negotiations for potential future membership." She placed a crystalline data rod on the central table, where it glowed with the official seal of the Taloran Elder Council. "Second, I propose the establishment of a new protocol for humanitarian response, one that prioritizes medical and civilian aid over military intervention, with clear guidelines for when and how peacekeeper forces may be deployed in crisis situations." Chancellor Varix nodded thoughtfully. "You have drafted this protocol?" "With the assistance of Commander Jarek and Dr. Malone. Yes. We call it the Taloran Protocol, in honor of those who suffered while we debated semantics and politics." The debate that followed was vigorous, but lacked the cynical undertones that had characterized previous council sessions. The absence of the syndicate's influence was palpable, creating space for genuine humanitarian concerns to take center stage. When the vote came, both proposals passed with overwhelming support. Talora would begin its journey toward council membership, and future humanitarian crises would be met with medical aid first, military force only as a last resort. As the session adjourned, Commander Jarek approached Sira in the corridor outside. He had exchanged his military uniform for the more subdued attire of a civilian advisor, a change that suited him, she thought. "Congratulations, Ambassador," he said. "The Talaran Protocol will save countless lives in the future." "Our work is just beginning," she replied. "Implementing the protocol will require vigilance and commitment." He smiled slightly. "Which is why I've accepted a position as liaison officer between the Peacekeepers and the Council's new Humanitarian Response Division. Someone needs to ensure the military remembers they serve life, not just strategic interests." Sira's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's unexpected, but welcome. You changed my perspective, Ambassador. Showed me that true security comes not from force, but from healing. It's a lesson the entire fleet needs to learn." Before she could respond, her communicator chimed with an incoming message. The holographic image of Dr. Malin appeared, his expression more relaxed than she had ever seen it. "Ambassador, good news from Talora. The last quarantine zone has been lifted. We've had no new cases in 14 days. The plague is officially contained." Relief washed over her. "That's wonderful, Doctor. How are the recovery efforts progressing?" "Better than expected. The medicinal gardens in the eastern regions are being replanted, and the combined Talaran human medical teams have established permanent research facilities to study the plague pathogen and develop preventative measures." "And Elder Thanos?" Milan's expression softened. "Recovering well. He asks when you plan to visit again. There will be a ceremony of remembrance and renewal at the next full moons, and your presence would be most welcome." "Tell him I wouldn't miss it," Sira replied. As the transmission ended, she turned back to Jarek. "Would you care to accompany me to Talora for the ceremony? I think it would mean a great deal to everyone involved." He inclined his head. "It would be an honor, Ambassador." As they walked together through the crystal-lined corridors of the hall, rainbow patterns dancing around their feet, Sira reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A crisis that could have ended in military confrontation had instead forged new bonds between worlds. The path had been painful, the cost measured in lives. But from that suffering had emerged a renewed commitment to compassion over force, healing over control. The stars, visible through the hall's transparent ceiling, reminded her of the vastness of the galaxy and the countless worlds that might one day face their own crises. Thanks to the Talaran Protocol, perhaps they would receive what they truly needed, not a human armada, but human help. The remembrance ceremony on Talora coincided with the convergence of the planet's 3 moons, a rare astronomical event that bathed the landscape in silvery blue light. In the central plaza of Vashon, where Sira had once landed alone in a desperate bid for peace, thousands of Talarans now gathered alongside human medical personnel and peacekeeper officers who had shed their weapons for ceremonial attire. Elder Thanos, still weakened by his bout with the plague, but standing proud, addressed the assembled crowd. "Tonight, we remember those lost to the great sickness. We honor their memory by building a future worthy of their sacrifice." One by one, Talarans and humans alike stepped forward to place luminescent flowers in a reflecting pool, each bloom representing a life lost or a community affected. The flowers drifted together, forming patterns of light that mirrored the triple moons above. "Tonight, we also celebrate life renewed," Thanos continued. "The healing of our world, the forging of new friendships, and the promise of a more connected future." He gestured to where Sira stood with Commander Jarek and Dr. Milan. These three embodied the best of what interstellar cooperation can achieve. They walked among us, not as conquerors, but as equals, offering help without demanding subservience. Sira stepped forward when invited, her voice carrying across the hushed plaza. What happened here on Talora has changed the way the Nine Worlds view crisis response. The Taloran Protocol ensures that future emergencies will be met first with healing hands, not armaments. Your suffering has created a legacy that will save countless lives across the galaxy. She paused, emotion threatening to overcome her practiced diplomatic composure. But more importantly, you have reminded us of something essential that we had begun to forget, that the true measure of civilization is not its military might or economic power, but its capacity for compassion in the face of suffering. As she spoke, the central reflecting pool began to glow more intensely, the bioluminescent flowers responding to the increased moonlight as all three moons aligned perfectly overhead. The light spread outward, illuminating the faces of all present in a soft blue radiance. In that light, Sira concluded, we see each other clearly, not as different species from different worlds, but as beings who share the same fundamental needs and hopes. May we never lose sight of that truth again. The ceremony continued late into the night, evolving from solemn remembrance to celebration of survival and renewal. Traditional Taloran music filled the air, joined by human instruments in an improvised harmony that symbolized their newfound cooperation. Sira found a moment of quiet on a balcony overlooking the plaza, watching the celebrations below. Commander Jarek joined her, offering a cup of Taloran herbal tea. Quite a transformation, he observed, both for this world and for the Nine. Sira nodded. The Council has ratified Talora's observer status, and 3 more worlds have applied for the same. Our response here, once it was properly implemented, has created a wave of goodwill. And the Syndicate? Diminished but not destroyed, she replied realistically. Their assets have been frozen pending the completion of trials, but organizations like that have deep roots. We'll need to remain vigilant. Jarek leaned against the railing. The new Humanitarian Response Division is already preparing protocols for potential crises on a dozen worlds. Next time, we'll be ready to respond properly from the beginning. And the Peacekeeper fleet? Undergoing its own transformation. Half our vessels are being retrofitted as dedicated medical and relief ships, with minimal defensive capabilities. The rest remain combat-ready, but with expanded humanitarian training for all personnel. Sira smiled. Progress, then. Thanks to you. She shook her head. Thanks to all of us who remembered that helping doesn't require controlling. Below them, Dr. Malin was demonstrating a Taloran healing ritual to a group of fascinated human physicians, while nearby, Peacekeeper engineers collaborated with local builders on designs for permanent medical facilities. You know, Jarek said thoughtfully, before all this, I believed that order was the highest value, that without it, nothing else was possible. But I've learned that compassion creates its own kind of order, one that doesn't need to be enforced with weapons. A lesson worth the learning, Sira replied softly, as the 3 moons began to separate from their perfect alignment, casting gradually shifting patterns of light across the celebration. Sira felt a profound sense of rightness. The crisis had been contained, yes, but more importantly, it had revealed a path forward, not just for Talora and the 9 worlds, but for all who sought to navigate the complex balance between security and compassion, between help and control. In the end, the Talorans had wanted help, not a human armada. By listening to that simple truth, they had all discovered something essential about what it truly meant to be civilized beings in a vast and often dangerous galaxy. Sometimes, the most powerful force wasn't firepower at all, but the simple willingness to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, to trust rather than fear. And that, Sira reflected as she rejoined the celebration below, was a legacy worth building upon. One world, one crisis, one act of compassion at a time.